There is a history of knockoff products being created and sold as being just like the real thing. Toys, purses, fast food franchises. Nothing is safe from being copied and passed off in foreign markets. Well, the same thing can happen in movies too, and in 1998, North America made their own monster movie. Genuine or cheap knockoff? You decide as we look to see if Godzilla is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Now, dear listeners, I've had an interesting time growing up because I had a mom who liked to watch really, really bad monster movies. And when you're young, you don't get to pick the movies all the time. But luckily, she picked the good ones, or quote unquote the good ones, because then I had a real passion for watching really bad monster movies. You know the ones of people in rubber suits running around a tiny little model town and stomping on everything. You know, the good stuff. Well, when it came time to take a look at 1998's Godzilla, I had to bring in the ringer. So here to join me for the first time on the show, my mom. Mom, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed our silly movie nights.
Oh, there were some bad ones. There were some bad ones. Like, if you ever have the chance to watch War of the Gargantuas, go treat yourself if you like really, 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 really bad films. But still, we're talking about the monster of all monsters, Godzilla, but one of the few North American versions of this. And one of the first ones that really said, hey, we can make Godzilla too. We can has Godzilla. But maybe they shouldn't have. But when it came to actually tackling this film, you were like, I would defend that. But why?
Why? Because if you ignore the fact that it's supposed to be Godzilla, it's actually a fun movie. There's a good storyline there. There's some pretty good acting in there and very interesting characters. You know, the monster is just kind of secondary to the whole story. So that's what it just never struck me as a really bad movie. And I've seen it a few times, so. And
the thing is, we've watched a few Godzilla films in the past.
Oh, many of them.
Yeah.
Many of them.
And yeah, it's one of those things where, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it's one of those things where you see the name, you know the name, you come in expecting certain things, and maybe that's not what you get. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. So before we get too deep into this, it is time to take this 1998 North American knockoff of a Godzilla film and trailerize it.
New York City, full of large egos, larger sewer rats, and towers large enough to hide a 350-foot monster from over 3 million people. That's why it takes a nuclear zoologist from Des Moines, his Iowa ex-girlfriend, and a Secret Service-type French guy to track down the wee beasties. Maybe it's because this Godzilla doesn't look like a guy in a rubber suit. Together, they'll track down the monster, help lay waste to an arena full of lizard babies, defy traffic laws and physics with a beat-up New York yellow cab, and hijack a news broadcast, all without the help of an umbrella. Because apparently, it rains a lot in New York. But, despite the mass devastation in this film, the only thing truly laid to waste is the legacy of a good Led Zeppelin classic after P. Diddy treated it like one of his freak-off parties. Matthew Broderick doesn't get a day off in Godzilla. Rated PG-13 for Le Petit Godzilla.
I think I have broken my mother, dear listeners. I think I have broken my mother.
Petite Godzilla.
Le Petit Godzilla. Which Jean Reno should have at least said it at that point.
Yep, exactly.
Zut alors, tous les petits Godzilla. Oh dear God, we're gonna get into this one for sure.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
But let's get into who is in this film. The movie stars Matthew Broderick, Jean Reno, Maria Pitillo, Hank Azaria, Kevin Dunn, Michael Lerner, Harry Shearer, Vicki Lewis, and Arabella Field. However, there is an almost starring in this one. Apparently, according to IMDb, Sarah Jessica Parker was turned down for the role of Audrey as played by Maria Pitillo, but she went on to marry Matthew Broderick, so maybe she wins?
I don't know.
But also under consideration for the film, and I'm going to run this list by you here. So including Sarah Jessica Parker in the role of Audrey, could you have pictured any of these actresses in the role? Let me go through the list. Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Connelly, Renee Zellweger, Winona Ryder, and Parker Posey.
You know who popped into my head when you said that? Was none of the above.
Well, who would you have put in? And keep in mind, this is 1998.
Meg Ryan.
You know what's funny? I mean, yes, I could picture Meg Ryan in this role.
That was the first thing that popped into my head.
And, it's almost like Maria Pitillo has a very Meg Ryan presence in this film. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you put Parker Posey in this movie, I would have been on board because I think because of the tonality of the film, Parker Posey, I think, would have understood the assignment very well.
Yeah, well, Maria Pitillo did a really good job of it.
Oh, yeah.
Felt she nailed the character.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe I'm just a Parker Posey stan after watching.
Well, there you go.
After watching Josie and the Pussycats, I'm a Parker Posey stan. In the role of Nick Totopoulos, as played by Matthew Broderick, apparently under consideration for the role was Michael J. Fox, which I can kind of see, but it's almost like they had a type. They had someone they were looking for this role.
Yeah, I know Michael J. Fox could probably have done it just fine, but I don't know. I don't think he fit what they were looking for, whereas Matthew Broderick did.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, obviously they were going for a bit of a lighter tone. They were going for someone who could pull off the action, but not come off as an action star. So I understand why they would consider Michael J. Fox, but I think they got exactly what they were looking for in Matthew Broderick.
Yeah.
The movie was directed by none other than Roland Emmerich, who likes to make big things go boom.
The master of disaster.
Exactly. However, in my research for this, I have to, dear listeners, I have to read this. According to IMDb, Jan de Bont was at one point attached to direct this film, but his idea apparently for a Godzilla film was that Godzilla was an artificial creation made by the Atlanteans.
Oh.
Like, that's what Jan de Bont wanted to do. Like, if Namor decided to make a giant freaking mech and attack New York, clearly making the MCU happen way before it was supposed to happen. But how do you take Godzilla and go, it would be really cool? Scratch everything that was created over however many years at that point, because what was it? The original Godzilla came out in the 50s, right?
1954.
Yeah. So let's scrap 45 years of big rubber suit monster history. We're going to make a mech.
Well, they did.
They did, but not by the Atlanteans.
No, just by some space aliens.
Right? Now, that being said, also in consideration, or at least talk to about this film, to direct James Cameron, Tim Burton, Paul Verhoeven, Joe Johnston, David Fincher, and Sam Raimi. Raimi, I think, would have been interesting.
Yeah, that would have been very interesting. But I think it would have probably leaned more towards the comedic side rather than...
Oh, very much so. Very much so. I mean, James Cameron would have been about a 3-hour-long monster movie.
Yes, it would have.
Tim Burton, it would have been a 2.5-hour weird movie.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul Verhoeven, you would have had Godzilla, uncross its legs and see everything about Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No.
just, and I don't even know what the hell David Fincher would have done with this film.
No. Don't want to go there.
The movie had a budget, according to IMDb, of $130 million. Domestically, it only made $136 million, but worldwide made $379 million. Now, let's point this out here. At that point, and it seems like not a lot of money, but it had made more money than any other American film based on a foreign movie until 2014, the release of the next Godzilla is directed by Gareth Edwards.
So really and truly not a flop when you look at it from that perspective.
No, from that perspective, no. And I mean, probably at that point, probably one of the highest grossing Godzilla films of all time, especially in New York. Not New York, but well, definitely New York, but definitely in North America. But yeah, no, like when it was released on the May 22nd Memorial Day long weekend, it debuted at number 1 with $55.7 million. Also debuting that week, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which debuted at number 6 with $4.3 million. In the middle, at number 2, you had Deep Impact. So, yay, another disaster film. And I love Deep Impact. It was good. The Horse Whisperer was at number 3, Bullworth at number 4, and Quest for Camelot at number 5. So the path was pretty much cleared at that point for Godzilla.
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't a lot there for competition.
There were some accolades for this film, good and bad. At the 1999 Saturn Awards, it won for Best Special Effects. Also was nominated for Best Fantasy Film, lost to The Truman Show. I don't know if I would qualify The Truman Show as a fantasy film, but, I would definitely agree that The Truman Show was a better film than Godzilla. Different. Very
different. Yeah.
Also, Roland Emmerich was nominated for Best Director. He lost to Michael Bay for Armageddon.
Okay.
Now, keeping in mind, this is the Saturn Award, so they're looking at sci-fi and fantasy and genre films. So, you're not going to get, I hate to say it this way, you're not going to get prestige directors going up against Roland Emmerich for this.
No.
And, in all fairness, Armageddon's not a bad film.
No, it's not.
No. I mean, it's the second best, asteroid film that came out that year, because Deep Impact, I think, is a better film. Armageddon is a better theater experience, but Deep Impact, I think, is a better film.
Yeah, of the two. I mean, Deep Impact was definitely a more possible film.
Yeah.
There was some reality in there, whereas with Armageddon, it was, these guys saving the day yet again.
Yeah.
And there's no way that could actually happen in real life.
Raw military porn. That is literally Michael Bay. Although it is funny to note that apparently before doing Godzilla, Roland Emmerich had this idea of doing a disaster film about a big giant meteor. But then Godzilla came around, he was doing that. And then all of a sudden, you got 2 movies in the same year. And he's like, Zut alors. Okay, well, maybe Jean Reno said that for him.
Yeah, probably.
At the 1999 Blockbuster Entertainment Awards. Hey, remember Blockbuster? Come With Me, the song that is basically Kashmir with P. Diddy all over it, was nominated for Fave Song from a Movie, lost to My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion from the movie Titanic. No duh. Like, really, no duh. I mean, say what you will about My Heart Will Go On and how overplayed it was.
Yeah.
But it is way better than Puff Daddy going, yeah, over Kashmir. There are much better songs on that soundtrack, including the Wallflowers doing a cover of David Bowie's Heroes. That song is fantastic.
Yeah.
Don't need any more. Song annoys me. I mean, Kashmir wasn't my favorite Led Zeppelin song to begin with. Puff Daddy made it worse. At the 1998 MTV VMAs, it was also nominated for Best Video from a Film, lost to I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith from Armageddon.
Yeah.
Again, a much better song, got a ton of radio play, and much better than
Yeah.
Yeah. At the 1999 Fangoria Awards, however, it was nominated for Worst Film. It lost to I Still Know What You Did Last Summer See, now we're into the bad awards here.
Yeah.
At the 1998 Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, it won for worst screenplay for a film grossing more than $100 million using Hollywood math. And yes, that is the title of that award.
Oh, wow.
It also won for worst song in a motion picture for Come With Me. Now, this is where I have to sit here and laugh. Because normally you sit there and take a look at the other nominees and say, was it really that bad? Right? This song, Puff Daddy, violating Led Zeppelin, one worst song over, and I kid you not, I Love You from Barney's Great Adventure.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, Puff Daddy won for worst song over I Love You, You Love Me. Told you it was bad.
Yeah.
And at the 1999 Razzies, it won for worst remake or sequel, but it tied. It tied with two other films, that being the remake of Psycho, which starred Vince Vaughn and Anne Hesh, and The Avengers, Ray Fiennes and Uma Thurman. The movie version.
Yeah, that one.
That one.
Oh.
Also nominated in the category that year were Lost in Space and Meet Joe Black.
Wow.
Which Lost in Space wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I'm glad it didn't win, but you had a three-way tie for worst remake or sequel. Also, Maria Pitillo won for worst supporting actress.
Really?
Yep. The film was also nominated for worst picture and worst screenplay, lost in both cases to an Alan Smithy film, Burn Hollywood Burn. And Roland Emmerich was nominated for worst director, lost to Gus Van Sant for Psycho. But the reason why we are here, not because my mother loves a good monster movie, are the critics. Over at Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an audience score of 28% and a tomatometer of 20%. Now, I want to put this into perspective before we get to the aggravated aggregate, okay? When it comes to Godzilla films over at Rotten Tomatoes, this film has the lowest tomatometer of any Godzilla film that has a tomatometer rating. However, when it comes to the audience score, not so much. So, this film has a 28% audience score, which equals Godzilla the Planet Eater, which is a 2018 animated film on Netflix. But in 1969, All Monsters Attack, which does qualify as part of the Godzilla franchise, has an 18% audience score. So even the audience is sitting there going, maybe it's not the worst. But over at Metacritic, this film has a meta score of 32, which is the second lowest Metascore of all Godzilla films that do have a score attached to them. Sitting at 31 is the 1985 Raymond Burr starring Godzilla film. So it's not the worst. It's not the worst. But let's get to the aggregate here. So again, Rotten Tomatoes score 20%, audience score 28%, Metacritic score 32%. At IMDb, it has a 5.4 star rating, giving it a 54%. At the movie database, it sits at 56%. And at Letterboxd, it has 2.2 stars out of 5, giving it a 44%. So your aggravated aggregate for 1998's Godzilla sits at 39%. So before we get into the breakdown here, Mom, 39% for this film. Harsh or accurate?
I think it's a bit harsh. I really do. I think there was a lot more going on in that movie. And I think the worst thing is that they were, you know what? It would have been a much better movie if they changed the title.
I can see that. I mean, we have mentioned on this show before movies that are quote unquote made as part of a franchise, but they're not really. They're just spec scripts, right? American Psycho 2 is always the one that comes to mind, which starred Mila Kunis and William Shatner in a pairing you never thought you'd expect in any movie whatsoever, but it's a spec script. And And they're like, well, we need to sell this movie somehow. And they basically slapped the American Psycho 2 title on it. They altered Mila Kunis's character a little bit in that she was one of the Patrick Bateman's survivors, but that's it. That is all there is to it. It's a spec script at that point. Hellraiser is kind of like the same way. Some of the later Hellraiser films were basically that. They're like, oh, hey, this is a decent script, but let's make the villain Pinhead.
Right.
So, no, this is one of those films where if it wasn't called Godzilla, because when you think about Godzilla, we'll get to this point right now because we're here. When you talk about Godzilla, you have that image in your head of big, bad, rubber-suited guy stomping on little tiny model towns.
Yes.
And yes, I recognize that is more your 60s and 70s kind of Godzilla film. But I mean, like, even movies like, Tokyo SOS and Godzilla Final Wars, there's a camp to them.
Yes, there is.
Like if you go in and it's not a big budget action film that you would expect to see, right? You expect that Japanese aesthetic.
Exactly. And that's what this movie only had that at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like the opening scenes of the movie were where they tried to tie it into Godzilla.
Yeah.
And they did that quite nicely. But where they fell down was in the actual look of the monster. Like, it just didn't look like the Godzilla we expect it to look like.
No, it looked like an angry, gas-filled, just came out of the Taco Bell iguana.
Which exactly what it was, because they had pictures of iguanas walking around the eggs as the nuclear bombs go off.
Yeah.
So that's a good description.
Now, apparently in Final Wars, like the idea for the sequel for this film was that the little bit, by the way, we're going to spoil the crap out of this film, but it was released in 1998. So, it's been around a while.
Mm-hmm.
The sequel was supposed to have one of the babies that remained after New York, transported to Australia, and it was supposed to terrorize Australia. So apparently in Final Wars, there's like a little reference on a map or something like that that has an attack happening in Australia. So apparently this film is actual canon.
Right.
It's just known as Zilla instead of Godzilla.
Yeah.
Which, if you would put out a film called Zilla, okay, maybe, right? Or even, Monsters in New York. I still would have watched that. If people went to go see Snakes on a Plane, because the film was called Snakes on a Plane. If you put Giant Iguana Attacks New York, I mean, maybe you're not getting a Matthew Broderick or a Jean Reno, but people will still go watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, like I said, they should have worked around that a little bit differently. So, you gave us the feel of Godzilla and then you took it away when we hit New York.
Yeah.
So I think that's where they really fell down. That was their downfall.
Yeah, you're right. The opening did feel very much like a Godzilla, film, especially like when you take a look at 2014's Godzilla, directed by Gareth Edwards. Like that's a solid Godzilla film. Mm-hmm. That proved that North America could do it, and they have been crapping on that legacy every film since then.
Yeah.
Which, dear listeners, if you haven't watched Godzilla X Kong, don't. Just don't. It's like 15 minutes to start the film of just straight monkey dialogue. Like, people will sit there and talk about the Star Wars Christmas special, the holiday special, and how it's like 40 minutes of like Shriwook. Godzilla X Kong.
Save your brain cells, everybody.
I mean, unless you want to just to turn your brain off for 2 hours.
Oh, there's that.
There is that. Absolutely. But he also gets a mech punchy glove. So that's all good. That film. Anyways, let's get to the breakdown of this film. We're going to start with Matthew Broderick, who played Dr. Nick Totopoulos. Your thoughts?
I thought he did quite a good job of it. Like, that character wasn't supposed to be your action hero.
No.
He was supposed to be your scientific advisor kind of thing. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, they didn't sort of get to the action part of it until, the very last part of the movie. So up to that point, he was just the scientific advisor. So he played the role, I think, exactly the way they wanted him to play it.
Mm-hmm.
He was the science guy who got caught up with all this stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
Because he's an out in the field measuring worms kind of guy rather than running around New York chasing reptiles kind of guy. So.
Also, is no one going to call him out for electroshocking the worms out of the dirt?
Funny, that crossed my mind too when I rewatched the movie.
Like, I'm sitting there going, like, if there was ever like a worm United Nations, that's a war crime right there. But you're right. Like, Nick is not the action star. Like, you're not going to put an actor like Bruce Willis in and then, like, have him go from zapping worms in Chernobyl one moment and then, like, somehow pick up a machine gun and start slaying little lizard babies,
exactly.
in the Madison Square Garden. That's not going to happen.
But not so small lizard babies.
In comparison, they're small lizard babies. But I mean, like, as I'm watching this, and maybe it's just because of previous roles before this film, two actors came to mind that I'm like, they would have maybe been a little bit better, but I don't know if you could sell the film because Matthew Broderick is still a big enough name.
Yeah.
Right? Jeff Goldblum, who of course was in Jurassic Park, prior to this. So, yeah. I mean, maybe it would have been a little bit more quirkier kind of thing, but also Brent Spiner.
But yeah, I could see him doing that. Yeah, because he's got some pretty good
acting chops and comedy chops too. Like, Brent Spiner is, but to the same token as well, it was just like 2 years previous that he was in Independence Day as the scientist there. So directed by Roland Emmerich. So maybe it's going to the well one too many times for that kind of role. And people would have, instantly equated the two. Brent Spiner, I think, would have been good, but it's not saying that Matthew Broderick wasn't good in this.
No, he was fine. He did the job that he was asked to do.
Yeah. And the fact that, again, Nick is not the action star. He's not the one picking up the machine gun and defending himself. He's literally sciencing his way through everything, which is exactly what you want a Matthew Broderick character to do.
Yeah, that's generally his level is at that. And that's what he put into this movie. Like, if you look back at other movies that he's done, his characters are always tend to have a gentle side to them.
Yeah.
And Nick Totopoulos had just that soft side to him, because the way he felt about Audrey and the way he felt about the work he was doing, that was very gentle.
Yeah.
If you take out the electricity for the worms.
I do have to laugh because as we were preparing for this episode, my mother's like, it rains a lot in that film, right? Which, okay, fine. But the minute we meet Nick in this film, he's singing in the rain.
Yep.
Like, it's almost like, we know exactly what we're doing. We do know. We're just going to keep doing it anyways and make fun of it. He's actually the second person in this film to make reference to the ridiculous amount of rain in this film.
Right.
Matthew Broderick through song, and then Harry Shearer by complaining about, where's the next big story? Look, what's our big story today? More rain. So they knew. But I mean, you take a look at his filmography up to this point, right? Yes, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is kind of like the big film, of course, but a movie like War Games or a movie like Project X, right? Or Glory even. Glory is a fantastic film, and he is perfect for that because he's in the war. Yes, he's in the trenches with his men, but he's also still their leader. It's also, I don't know if anyone else should have been that role in Glory. Like, it's a fantastic film, but yes, the fact that he's not the guy picking up the gun, he's the guy who's literally sciencing his way through this. You would be hard pressed to find someone, I think, better than Matthew Broderick for that kind of non-action role.
Well, you might have, but it might have been somebody who wasn't a name.
Yeah, a bankable, on the marquee name in 1998. Even the fact that, and yes, I recognize they're running away from things that don't exist. I understand movies and how they CGI things, But even his awkward running away from these lizards almost fits in character.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he spends his time digging in the dirt looking for irradiated worms. I mean, if you've got to go fishing, you got to go fishing, right? But if he's an awkward runner, that almost adds to the character, and I kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Also, now, dear listeners, you'll watch this film and you'll watch him run, and you will never unnotice that. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, but I'm sorry. Maria Pitillo, who played Audrey Timmons, your thoughts?
I thought she did a good job. Again, there's probably many an actress, like we talked about, who could have done the role just as well. She was good at portraying someone who was conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she wanted to be that reporter, but she didn't want to do the things she had to do to get to be the reporter. She was very good at bringing out that conflict between herself. And yeah, I mean, was it, an over-the-top performance? No, it was kind of understated. But again, I think that's what they were going for. Again, she's not the action person.
Yeah.
Right? Just like Nick, Audrey's not the action person. So she played that quite well. I mean, you could almost see her kind of pulling herself together. So I've got to do this because we're stuck here now and I have to do this. Especially when they get into where all the creatures are and they're going on air. Like, you can just see her like pulling all her strength together in order to do what she needed to do, which was basically tell them to blow them all up, them included.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, here's a girl, and I think it makes sense that she basically, I want to say walked out on, but she kind of walked out on Nick, right? To go to New York to follow this dream. I get it. I understand that part, right? Yeah. But then you've got this Iowa girl in New York, and she needs her friends to push her. She needs, she needs Hank Azaria. She needs Arabella Field. So Vic and Lucy, her friends, to give her that push, because she's in way over her head, right? And she's dealing with, New York egos and New York assholes. Let's put it exactly how it is.
Yep.
Harry Shearer's character is an asshole in this. But,
oh, absolutely.
Right. But the thing is that you're right. She's reporting her way through things. And, the fact that she's basically chasing around Nick, right? Chasing after him, chasing after what she left behind, even though she almost completely screws it up again in stealing the footage, which is, again, what a reporter would do. But the thing here is that when it comes to pairing people who you would expect to be together, you want Audrey and Nick to work. Because if you wanted Nick to find his independence from Audrey and to walk away from her after what she did, then you would put more emphasis on Vicki Lewis's character.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. You want Nick and Audrey to get back together, so Maria needs to play her in this sweet way, and it works. Yes. Even though she made dumbass choices, it still works, and he still loves her despite her dumbass choices. Yeah,
you can tell he never let go because he had her pictures everywhere, and it was 8 years later.
Yeah, but the other thing too is that you want a couple that looks like they would be a couple. That looks like they work together. And seeing Maria Pitillo and Matthew Broderick on screen together, Nick and Audrey make sense.
Yeah, it did. Very much so.
Vicki Lewis's character, Dr. Elise Chapman, is a little too forward for Nick.
Oh, yeah.
It's great for the role, but she's a little too forward, a little too much for Nick to handle, I think.
Oh, yeah. He wouldn't know where to go with that.
Yeah. Nick and Audrey are both in their ways just broken enough or just not confident enough in themselves, so they kind of need each other. Yeah. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
The two of them do make sense together. And yes, again, I could still see a Parker Posey, and I could definitely see a Meg Ryan in the role. But to the same token as well, you don't want someone to upstage your main star.
Yeah.
And I think Maria Pitillo did the perfect balancing act for that. Right? Yep. It's Matthew Broderick's movie, but you want someone who's there enough to complement that, but yet still be her own star in her own right.
Yeah, I mean, she had some pretty good scenes all by herself.
Oh, absolutely.
So, it worked out well. Like, the pairing worked well.
I'm just going to sit back and let you start this one. Jean Reno as Philippe Rocher.
One of my favorite actors. I've loved him in everything I've seen him in, even the Pink Panther movie with Steve Martin.
Oh, he was freaking brilliant in that.
He was so good. In this one, yes, you got a little bit of humor from him, but not as much, I think, as they could have. But that wasn't really what they were going for. So, yeah, he really played the mysterious, French Secret Service, whatever he was, kind of guy. He did a good job. But, yeah, I mean, there were moments where you could get the funny side of him there, but Jean Reno, whenever he's in a movie, he just kind of fills the screen. He's that kind of an actor. And, when he goes around complaining about the coffee, American coffee, that was great. And yeah, I mean, he brought a certain gravitas to that role. And what struck me the most was at the end when he's walking away and he's all by himself. And you realize that he had a whole team and he just lost a whole team. Yet he's still trying to complete the mission in any way he can. And he was really good at that.
I think it needs to be said that Jean Reno is one of the best straight comedy men out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's so subtle. It's so subtle what he does, but it's so over the top at the same time. Like he knows exactly what he's doing. I'm so glad you brought up the team because this needs to be said. Okay. And we're not talking about the actors themselves here, but I just need to point out the 4 character names for his team. They are listed, and I'm not even kidding here. Jean-Luc, Jean-Claude, Jean-Pierre, and Jean-Philippe.
Yep.
Those are the team members for Jean Reno in this. But I mean, like, he knows exactly what this is, right? He recognizes that he's the comedic relief in this. He recognizes that he's the one that needs to. This isn't a slapstick film.
No.
This is not one of those type of films, but it is still a lighthearted film at its heart. So they're really, they're putting the comedy in, not necessarily in the way the monster looks, which is kind of what those classic 70s, Godzilla films does. No, he recognizes that he needs to be the one. But I need to point this out, though. And I think this is where Godzilla also falters as well. In that, in every single Godzilla film, maybe save one, Godzilla is the star of the film.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who else you put in this film. Even Raymond frickin' Burr
they
in
were
1985.
All secondary characters.
The exception is probably Godzilla -1, where it's very much a human story.
Oh yeah, that's a totally different story altogether.
Yeah. And Godzilla is kind of like the backdrop and the antagonist of the film, but it's still a Godzilla film, right? It's just much better written than you would expect from a Godzilla film. I love the 2014. I love Gareth Edwards as a director. I love pretty much everything he's done to this point, right? Star Wars Rogue One is the best Star Wars film that ever Star Warsed, especially under the Disney banner, right? Yeah. I loved the creator. Were there some pacing issues? Maybe, but I think visually it was a fantastic film. Here, right? Godzilla -1 takes it to the next level. Absolutely. Godzilla 1998, I think if there was more focus on Godzilla, like, because there were times when it was basically like, okay, let's just keep on paying attention to the humans. It felt more like Cloverfield at a point.
Yeah, a little bit.
You have humans running around New York trying to figure out what the hell to do. Meanwhile, there's this monster somewhere around. And you don't really see it, but I think Cloverfield's a better Godzilla film than this Godzilla film.
Yeah, in some ways, you're right. I mean, they did spend a lot of time running around. So, yeah, I agree with you there. That's the way it should be. It shouldn't have been. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, if you are going to have someone, be the lightheartedness, you could do much worse than Jean Reno.
Oh, Lord, yes. You could have had an over-the-top Jim Carrey kind of thing.
Yeah, no.
That really would have been bad.
You
wanted that subtlety. You wanted the comedy to be this gentle thread, not this blaring red siren across the screen.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about him earlier in the podcast, but this is basically the equivalent of Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, where he's freaking Jeff Goldblum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, when he comes on the screen and you're like, oh, you're going to Goldblum all over the place, right? But it was that much needed levity in the action that was Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Which might also have been a better Godzilla film than this Godzilla film. But still, regardless, Jean Reno in this is equivalent to Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. And I don't think you can have Jurassic Park without what Jeff Goldblum brought to that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, he was by far and away the most interesting character in Jurassic Park. And he remained that way all the way through the series.
Exactly. Hank Azaria, who played Victor Animal Pilati, the ENG camera guy that was basically like the little devil on the shoulder, seemingly for Audrey in this. Your thoughts?
Oh yeah, I loved Hank Azaria in this movie. Again, he's that chameleon actor. He can be the anything. Mm-hmm. And in this one, he was exactly what they needed. Again, he brought a lot of the humor to it, but he also brought a lot of the action. Like, he was the catalyst for a lot of stuff in the movie. So yeah, his role, while you think of him as a second character, was far more important than some of the others.
Yeah.
Like, he really was a key in that whole thing. And like when you're watching the movie and he's standing there waiting for the Godzilla to come step on him, and it just misses him, comes up between the toes kind of thing. And he's just standing there with this look on his face. I mean, not many actors can pull that off. Yeah. But he can.
Yeah. I mean, there were a number of times that he probably should have died in this film, but he didn't. But it's PG-13, so what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But he is the epitome of the attitude that Audrey needs to succeed in New York. And he's supportive in the way that you want him to be supportive.
Yeah.
Right. Hank Azaria, he is a chameleon. He's a fantastic voice talent. I mean, he was also one of the best parts of America's Sweethearts in a very, not necessarily a minor supporting role, but definitely not one of the lead roles. But anytime he was on the screen, it's like, oh, it's about to get good. It's about to get juicy, because that's Hank Azaria.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That is him all the way through. And doesn't matter what movie he's in, he always brings something to it. Mm-hmm. And like you say, as soon as he's on the screen, you're ready and waiting and watching for, what's going to happen now?
And then you have Arabella Field, who played his wife, Lucy, Vic's wife, Audrey's best friend. Your thoughts on her?
The character was a little over the top, a little too New York-y, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I don't think they did as much with that character as they could have done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt she was very, very secondary. You saw her a bit more at the beginning when she's talking to Audrey as her friend and stuff, and, trying to get her to realize that she's got to be more if she wants to be a reporter and stuff like that. But as the movie progressed, you kind of lost sight of her altogether.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like they basically had one criteria. Like, when you're writing a character, you tend to put down a character description, right? Almost like this is what this character is, not necessarily who it is, right? And it's almost like Lucy was written down as she's New York, she's Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you were looking to make this role bigger, the only next logical actor to put in that role is Fran Drescher.
Oh, God, yeah.
But I think Arabella Field did enough in being New York. And again, pairing very well with Hank Azaria.
Yeah, that part of it worked quite well.
And again, to the same token as you want your couples to look like they are actual couples rather than sit there and go, how are you two even together?
Yeah.
Right. And I think you had that with Hank Azaria and Arabella Field. Speaking of people who you have to be able to picture them together, we need to talk about two people in this.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Lerner and Laurie Goldman. Michael Lerner playing Mayor Ebert and his assistant, Jean.
Yeah. They were a comedy team all on their own.
And if it sounds familiar, like, hey, Gene Siskel, Roger Ebert. Yes, this is exactly who they're supposed to be.
Ah, okay.
With all the thumbing up and thumbing down that they do throughout the film. And apparently, they were written this way specifically because of the way critics in general, but, Siskel and Ebert, also specifically of how they were, how they treated movies like Independence Day and Stargate, films that, Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin had worked on in the past. Now, Siskel and Ebert put this on their list of one of the worst films of 1998. But Roger Ebert himself did say that Michael Lerner's pseudo portrayal of him was quote unquote gamely played.
Yeah.
Apparently the two of them were watching this film like, so when are we getting squashed? But your thoughts, I think more so on Michael Lerner, who played Mayor Ebert.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was good. He really was. And he was the epitome of the pushy politician.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you could have asked him to do more than he did with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He reminded me a lot, and I can't remember the actor's name right now, but in the original Ghostbusters film, the guy who played the mayor in that, he reminded me a lot of that kind of personality.
Yeah.
But the minute you hear Mayor Ebert and you see like the hair and the glasses, and you're like, oh God, they did, didn't they?
They absolutely did.
As soon as he called his assistant Gene, it's like, oh my God, they did that, didn't they? And the fact that Laurie Goldman kind of looks a little bit of the way Gene Siskel looked back then, like, you knew exactly what you're doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. And I think it's one of those, okay. Oh, okay, touche.
Yeah.
Touche. But it's kind of funny because once you get the reference, you sit there and go, okay, that is kind of funny.
Yeah.
I will agree with Siskel and Ebert that they should have been squashed like a bug. But it's one of those things where it's like, do you go too far at that point?
Yeah. They took it just to the right level.
Yeah.
They didn't go beyond the line.
The sad part about it is, of course, today, in our year of podcast 2024, a lot of people aren't going to get that if they're just watching this film for the first time. Like,
yes.
This is one of those jokes that hit well at the time.
Yeah.
And people who know will know.
Yeah.
Right. But it's one of those gags that you have to do the research, I think, if you're just discovering this film now.
It doesn't age well.
No.
Because there's people out there who've never heard of Siskel and Ebert.
Exactly.
And know what amazing critics they were.
Yeah. No, now people just, hop on Spotify and listen to jackasses like me talk about films.
Well, there you go.
Which, sorry, not sorry. Kevin Dunn, who played Colonel Hicks. Your thoughts?
Yeah, again, not over the top, but definitely, he perhaps could have been a little bit more forceful because he kind of gave in a little bit to, like he wasn't playing your stereotypical, over the top military type that wouldn't listen to anybody else. At least he played this guy like he was actually listening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at times though, he got
overruled. Yeah.
Right. But he knew in his heart that what Nick was telling him was probably the way to go. But he got overruled by his superiors.
See, and again, this is just me. I can't look at Kevin Dunn and not think of Sam Witwicky's dad in the Transformers films.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to disagree with you in that this isn't a film where you want a gruff type of colonel. Like, you don't want Sam Elliott or Tommy Lee Jones in that role. You don't want Michael Ironside in that role.
No.
You don't want someone who's going to run over everything, because if you have someone like a Michael Ironside, which again, Michael Ironside is just always so much fun, you have then someone who you cannot picture entrusting this, we're going to chase down a giant monster in New York City assignment to a Matthew Broderick type character. Kevin Dunn's portrayal as Colonel Hicks, commanding voice. Fantastic commanding voice in this. But he looks like the kind of colonel who would trust in the science and not in the military action first. And I think in that sense, Kevin Dunn was almost perfectly cast for it.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying he was poorly cast or that he did a bad job. You just think maybe the character should have projected a little more. I'm not saying go over the top, but just a little more authority.
Yeah. I mean, maybe more authoritative and maybe a bit more on Nick's ass to get things done.
Yeah.
I could see that a bit more because it's his ass on the line for trusting the scientists as opposed to, trusting in let's just put up, I don't know, 25 or 30 different helicopters in the same aisle in a New York street, which I'm sorry, there is no way in reality you are fitting that many helicopters flying down a New York street in between buildings. Like, I take a lot for granted when it comes to films. I'm looking at that and going,
yeah, no,
like,
definitely not.
At what point is Marlon Brando's going to be on the roof playing Ride of the Valkyrie? Because that's kind of what it felt like.
Oh, yeah. If they'd played that music, that would have been absolute perfect.
But if they played that music, the only thing that would be going through my head would be kill the Wabbit, kill the Wabbit. Vicki Lewis, who played Dr. Elise Chapman, your thoughts?
She did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she did a good job.
I mean, definitely too much for Nick to handle.
Oh, God, yes. Absolutely. She was a formidable character.
Yes.
Like, really. She was a force of nature, that one. And the actress really brought that out in that character. You could see that everybody else around her is kind of like backing off because she is this force of nature that just comes roaring through.
Yeah. I mean, when I first watched this film, right, I had to disassociate myself from what I already knew because, like, it was around this time that she was also in news radio. Mm-hmm. So it was hard for me to separate the two characters there because there were times when, she was getting into that character as well. But as I'm watching it today, and I don't want to do the math on this, but I'm going to do the math. 26 years have passed since this film have come out.
Yep.
And now that I see this and, some of the things that have come out since then, she reminds me a lot of what Kat Dennings brought to the role of Darcy.
Oh, I love that
Thor,
role.
The Dark World, and WandaVision. Dr. Elise Chapman kind of has that vibe where she's smart, but she's also a smart ass.
Yes, very much so.
So it's the bit of snark that you need because obviously she is ridiculously intelligent for the military to bring her into, I don't know, giant lizard tracks found in the middle of wherever the hell they were.
Exactly.
So you want someone who knows exactly that she's the person for the job. And Vicki Lewis brought that completely.
Yeah, she's got confidence in herself.
Yes.
To boot.
Yeah. But yeah, in hindsight, there was a lot of Kat Dennings Darcy in this.
Yeah. And I love Kat Dennings. She's great.
Finally, Harry Shearer, who played Charles Kamen, the ridiculously unlikable news anchor.
Oh, the one you want to strangle every 5 seconds that he's on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's exactly what he was meant to be. And he pulled that off perfectly. I wanted to strangle him. I wanted Godzilla to stomp all over him.
It's freaking Harry Shearer, so you know you're going to have a good time, right? But the thing is, you want someone to be comedically unlikable. You don't want him to be like just mean or disgusting or lewd kind of thing, even though he's still making a pass at Audrey, right? But you don't want him to, you don't want this to be an icky situation. You want it to be comedic enough, but still make him as unlikable as humanly possible.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And he played it to a T.
I will say it is hard for me to disassociate Harry Shearer from this character because anytime he's on the screen, anytime I hear his voice, it's Derek Smalls from This Is Spinal Tap.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I literally, I was waiting for Charles Kamen to bust into Jazz Odyssey. Spinal Tap 2.0. Derek Smalls on the bass. He wrote this. Spinal Tap is life. Spinal Tap is life.
There you go.
Is there anyone else in this film that you feel needs to be discussed?
Yes, there is one character that you have totally bypassed and who he didn't have that huge a role in the movie, but it was Doug Savant as Sergeant O'Neill.
Yes.
Loved him to pieces in this. And then, like you, I have a hard time separating him from his role in Desperate Housewives. For those of you who remember that show.
Or actually actively watched it like I didn't.
Yeah. I watched the first few seasons. But yeah, he really brought that, here's this sergeant stuck in this situation who is in way over his head, literally, and coping with it as best he can, as well as being very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the movie.
Well, especially figuring out that whole,
the whole taxi cab thing.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way, he was his own hero and he didn't even realize what he was doing was so important. But he played that character very, very well. And I liked that character all the way through from the first time he appeared on the screen.
It's funny because as I was watching this film, there was the point after, they had defeated everybody. The lizard babies are dead in Madison Square Garden, and they've shot down Godzilla on the suspension bridge. Oh, by the way, spoilers. And then Kevin Dunn's character calls him up and saying, "Damn good job." And I was waiting for him to say "Thanks, Dad" or something like that, because it felt like the two of them could have been related.
Yeah. Yeah, they had very similar type personalities. So, yeah. But no, it was just, I guess he knew his sergeant well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It was an interesting moment where I'm like, okay, is there a point where O'Neill was not necessarily up to the task? It feels like a deleted scene that would have solidified that moment a bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, the two did feel related, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to talk about the rain.
Oh, bring on the rain.
There is an abnormal amount of rain in this film to the point that I felt like I was watching Blade Runner.
Yep.
Did you find it distracting at all?
It didn't take away from the story from me, but it definitely, I don't know. You needed some rain would have been fine, but let them dry out at some point, for God's sakes, And I mean, there were times when it was raining and then it wasn't raining. Why, like when they come out of Madison Square Garden, all of a sudden it's not raining.
Yeah. No, I understand weather changes, but still,
yeah.
But there's times when they're driving and all, and especially when he's in the cab that Jean Reno co-ops and brings them to the French Secret Service staging ground, and it's like, did you put the rain machine on high? Because it felt like you did.
Yeah,
it's like you ran out of the rain machine sprinklers and you just switched to buckets at that point.
Yeah, that's about right. There was times when it was too much.
Yeah, which apparently, and again, this is one of those things where you discover it when you're doing your research. So apparently a lot of the actors had wetsuits given to them to wear under their clothes. Matthew Broderick was initially complaining because his was one of the only ones that did up in the back.
Oh.
Until Harry Shearer made him realize that no, it's you're wearing it backwards.
Oh, the things you find out, eh?
This is according to IMDb, so I'm just telling you what I read. So now that we've kind of gone through all of this, there's still one character we haven't really talked about as much. And that's Godzilla himself.
Yep.
Like, knowing what we know about the franchise and knowing what we know about the monster itself, I ask you now that we've talked about this for an hour, is this still a Godzilla film, or should this have just been retitled, give the character some other name, and just call it a monster film?
Yeah, I think they should have done that. Aside, like I said, from the early scenes, which were very Godzilla-like, after that, all bets were off.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own little looking up, I came across this, that the inspiration for the monster in this movie, Godzilla, was actually inspired by Ray Harryhausen's creature, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which is a completely different looking creature. And then, of course, they just added stuff to it to make it more, because Ray Harryhausen did everything in claymation.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I thought that was really interesting. Like, it wasn't inspired by Godzilla. It was inspired by something completely different. So why call it Godzilla?
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to pull inspiration from Ray Harryhausen, you are in literally the best of ballparks. Like, as Ray Harryhausen knew what I don't know how many times I watched the original Clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
That's just a brilliant film. I even really enjoyed the Sam Worthington remake.
Yeah.
And yes, it qualifies. So somewhere down that road,
we may have to do that
we're going to
one.
have to talk about Clash of the Titans. And we're definitely going to have to talk about Wrath of the Titans, because that also qualifies. But I mean, there is a market for monster movies.
Yep.
But I also understand that there is a selling point to the title Godzilla.
Yeah, but could they not have found something, like, give it just a completely different name?
Yeah. But to the same token as well, when I think about a Godzilla film, I want to see Godzilla fight a monster.
Yes.
Like, even in the other North American films, and I recognize that some of them are just not as good as the 2014 Gareth Edwards.
Yeah.
I understand this. I appreciate it. But I still want to see Godzilla fight another monster.
Yeah.
I don't want this to be Godzilla is the disaster. Godzilla has always been, in his own Tokyo destructive ways, the hero of the film. Even if he did squash a few bunch. And again, -1 is the other exception.
Yeah.
But -1 is a mastercraft piece of storytelling.
Yes.
That transcended what a Godzilla film could be. But when it comes down to it, I want to see Godzilla fight another big ass monster.
Yeah. Where was that? There was none of that.
Yeah. And
unless you count the submarines as the monster.
No. No. Like, give me King Ghidorah, give me Mothra, give me anything.
Yep.
Instead of a bunch of discount Godzukis running around Madison Square Garden like the Rangers just won the Stanley Cup championship. Which, by the way, if the Rangers ever win the Stanley Cup championship again, the Madison Square Garden will look like that. Actually, I think more of the Knicks. If the Knicks win the championship, then they're going to trash the place, because it's going to be a party.
Yeah, there you go.
Rangers at least had won in 1994, so there's recent history there at least. But yeah, no, like, you can make a monster film and not have it be a Godzilla film and still have it be damn good.
Yes. And this movie was not that bad.
No.
You just didn't need to call it Godzilla.
Yeah. You put the title on, you got to bring the Godzilla game.
Yeah.
They didn't bring the Godzilla game.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think if they had done that, they might have actually got their sequel.
Yes. Because you're then creating a brand new franchise that is
Exactly.
uniquely North American.
Yeah.
And then you can cultivate that.
Yep.
Now, apparently, the idea for the sequel then translated into a Godzilla animated series, which was actually fairly well received, and it only lasted for one season. But that proves that there is a market, and again, the more recent films have proven that there is a market there as well. And I think Godzilla X Kong really stands out as being less than, only because Godzilla Minus One proved that it can be so much more, So there is a market for monster movies. You just don't need to put the same tag on it and, ride that wave. It's a global cinema world. We know what the Godzilla films are doing in Japan.
Yeah.
We don't need to copy that, even though I like a lot of the films that have come out since then.
Mm-hmm.
But just make your own damn universe.
Yep.
Until we get Pacific Rim in that kaiju verse, because then we get our monsters fighting Godzilla and robots and I know what I like. And that's what I want. Big giant monsters punching big giant robots, and the robots punching back. That's what I want.
That's what you got in Pacific Rim.
Which is why Pacific Rim is so good.
Yes. Why was the next one not so good?
Because it wasn't the first one.
That's right.
But I will say Pacific Rim the Black, the animated series that is on Netflix, is actually quite good if you're in for a more modern look anime take on the Pacific Rim series. Like, again, you can do good in different markets. And even the Godzilla animated films on Netflix are quite good if you're into some of the anime, very Japanese soundtracks that go along with it.
Yeah.
Right? But for the artwork style, it's fantastic.
Okay.
Now, it has come time. Now, we've talked enough about the giant lizard in New York. We're not going to call it Godzilla. We're just going to call it, lizards in New York City.
There you go.
Who is your MVP of 1998's Godzilla?
Well, I have to put some thought in it because there were so many good characters in there and well-played characters. But I have a soft spot for Jean Reno.
I could have called that one a mile away.
Yes, you could. You know me well.
Well, I'm gonna right or wrong here because I think the Razzies got it wrong. My MVP is Maria Pitillo in this film because there's something spunky about Audrey that adds a lot to it, and I think adds a lot to Hank Azaria's character. I think adds a lot to Matthew Broderick's character. And yes, I recognize that she has now retired from acting and is now, I think, in interior design with her husband. But she left a good mark with Godzilla. And I think the Razzies got it absolutely wrong.
Yeah, I don't think she deserved that at all either.
No, I'm sure I could take a look through 1998 and find some much worse performances. Maria Pitillo was unfairly maligned for that one.
Yep.
She's my MVP. Mom, thank you so much for
you are welcome.
Watching a big monster movie with me again. That's awesome.
Anytime.
Oh, you say that. You say that, but I find some really, really bad films. So maybe I'm gonna, deep dive into my library and see what garbage I can throw your way.
Oh, it's like some old Asylum films, like
we're going down Asylum Road in October. We're going down Asylum Road in October. So maybe, just maybe. I'm not saying which film is on the docket from October.
Okay.
But there are 5 Mocktober films that we are covering. Yeah, I know. I think I know which one I'm giving you.
Okay.
All right. Now, you, dear listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned or you think is so bad that there is no way in rainy New York City that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on social media at NotThatBadCast or go to our website at NotThatBadCast.com. And while you're there, check out our Coming Soon page because very soon, I'm going to be posting the 5 movies that we are going to be covering during Mocktober. So we want to hear your comments on those. So drop us a line. We'll shout you out in those shows. Until next time, that's my mom. And I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.
Waterproof records are your unsinkable tunes from the past, present, and future. What's up, everyone? I'm Jacob Givens, the host of Waterproof Records podcast. So what exactly is a waterproof record? Let's go back in time for a moment to when you were a teenager, and it's the first time you heard an album that would change you forever. Whether you're a musician and it was the reason you picked up an instrument and started a band, or if you're just a music lover, it's the album that made you who you are to this day. You'll tell people that your life wouldn't be the same without it. It changed your DNA. So join me on the podcast where I do deep dives on some of the most influential and important albums in my life. And other times I welcome guests on the show to talk about their musical journeys and what they consider to be their waterproof record. It's time to wax nostalgic with Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens.